Welcome to Lesson 1B.7, Guided Notes and Must-Do Practice. At the end of this, you're going to turn in your guided notes. I don't usually have you turn them in, but I put them all on one piece of paper, so you'll have guided notes and then practice right under it. So what we're going to be doing is completing the square. It's a process that allows us to write an expression in this form, x squared plus bx, as a square of a binomial. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to start off with something that looks like this, and we're going to change it to something that looks like this, because this kind of an equation is very easy to solve. Now, let me show you what I mean. So for example, what if I had something that looked like this, and I wanted to solve it? Now you just practiced doing this. This is solving by square root, and you know that you can square root here, and you can square root here. And when I square root something that's squared, I just get to cancel those. So inside here I have x minus 4. And over here I have the square root of 9, which we know is 3. But when we take the square root, it's plus or minus. All right, so now in the last step, I want to move the 4 to the other side. Plus 4. Looks a little messy, but we have on this side, x is equal to 4. And I'm going to put the plus or minus second. Always put it second, because otherwise it would be very confusing. And over here, that means we have 4 plus 3. And we have x is equal to 4 minus 3. So we have two answers, 7 and 1. And that was very easy to solve. So our goal is to make any equation that looks like this, a trinomial, into one that looks like this, because that's easy to solve. The other thing that we learned to do is we learned to factor. And the thing about factoring is it doesn't always work. So you found that there were some problems that you couldn't factor, or they were really difficult to factor, even if you could. So completing the square works with all quadratics. So you don't have to worry about whether it's factorable or not. It will always work. All right, so let's start with step 1. We want to learn how to turn any trinomial, that means 3 terms, into a perfect trinomial. So we want this c value right here to be b over 2 squared. I'm going to use the same procedure over and over and over again, so you get used to it. I'm going to start by looking at this equation, and I can see, remember, ax squared plus bx plus c is the standard form for a quadratic equation. And we can see that b is the number that's in front of the x. So I'm going to start by writing down b. b is equal to negative 7. Now I'm going to write down b over 2. So if I divide this by 2, I get negative 7 divided by 2. And then the last one is b over 2 squared. All right, so if I square that, I get negative 7 squared, which is equal to, if I square negative 7, I get 49. And if I square 2, I get 4. All right, so now I have my b over 2, and my b over 2 squared. And I come over here and I look and I see I want this thing to look like this. So what's it missing? It's missing b over 2 squared. So I have x squared minus 7. And I'm going to replace this c with b over 2 squared, which in this case is a positive 49 over 4. And I'm done. Okay, let's try and practice one of these. So take a minute, write your notes down, put it on pause, and then let's practice one. Let's do it again. Let's choose this one. So you're going to do the next, I think it's 6 problems, and I'm just going to do this one for you. So you have another sample. Again, I'm going to start by writing down b. Now b for this is 26. b over 2 is where I take 26 and divide it by 2, so that's 13. And b over 2 squared is where I take that number and I square it, so that's 169. So that means that what I want in this location right there is b over 2 squared. So x squared plus 26, x plus 169 gives me a perfect trinomial. So I just moved this equation over to here and added the 169. All right, you're going to do the next couple of problems and then put it on pause and then come back and watch me do example number 2. Okay, example number 2, we're going to go the next step. And the next step is actually completing the square. So that means we're going to take our equation and make it look like this. And then when it looks like that, we're going to replace it with this. All right, so step one, let's make our equation look like the first one. So again, we're always going to write down b. So in this case, b is 10. b over 2 is 10 divided by 2, or 5. And b over 2 squared is where I take that number and square it. 5 squared is 25. All right, so that means I need a 25 in this location right there, and there's not a 25. So how do I get rid of that? Well, we can always move it to the other side. Plus 10x minus 3 is equal to 0. So let's move that 3 over to the other side by doing plus 3 plus 3. Okay, so now we have x squared plus 10x. Now there's a blank right there, equals 3. And we're going to plug something in there. So what goes in there? What goes in there is b over 2 squared. But what's b over 2 squared? It's over here. It's 25. So let's add the 25. You can't just add 25 to an equation because you want to. You can if you balance the equation. So I'm going to add it to this side. So now I just added it to both sides and I haven't changed anything. All right, so now we're at the next step. And the next step is, now that this is a perfect trinomial with a 25 right there, I can replace it with a binomial. So I'm going to replace this trinomial with x plus b over 2. But what's b over 2? 5 squared equals, and on this side I get a 28. Okay, we just did the hard part. We just completed the square, and then we're just going to finish the problem now. So we're going to finish it by taking the square root of this side and taking the square root of this side. On this side, I get to cancel square roots. And on this side, I have plus or minus the square root of 28. And off to the side here, I'm going to do square root of 28. We break it down into the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So the square root of 28 is actually 2 square roots of 7. Okay. So I'm going to replace this with plus or minus 2 square roots of 7, x plus 5. All right, almost done. Last step, I'm just going to have to give myself a little more room. And I'm going to move the 5 to the other side. So if I subtract 5 from both sides, I get minus 5 plus or minus 2 square roots of 7. And I am done. That's my answer. Okay, you get to do the next couple of practice problems. If I were you, I would go back if you need to on the video and see how we did that again. And then come over and try these. Okay, pause the video at any time you need to. I'm going to do number 48 for you so you have one more done. So again, I want this x squared minus 12x to look like this on this side. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull out b. So we have b is equal to negative 12. And b over 2 is half of that, so it's negative 6. And b over 2 squared is, if I square a negative 6, I get a positive 36. All right, so that means that in this location right here, I want a positive 36, and I have nothing right there. So I need to put a positive 36 there. So I have x squared minus 12x, and I'm going to put plus 36. And on this side, I have minus 28. So now I have to put plus 36 over here, otherwise it doesn't balance my equation. So minus 28 plus 36 is a positive 8. And on this side, I have now a perfect trinomial. So I have one of these. But my goal is to replace it with a binomial. So let's replace that perfect trinomial with x plus, what's b over 2? Oop, let's get rid of that. Why? Because b over 2 is a negative 6. Minus 6. There you go. We completed the square. And now we're just going to finish the problem. So finishing the problem is, can you square root it? Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to take the square root of this side and the square root of this side. On this side, I get x plus 6. And on this side, I get plus or minus the square root of 8. And again, over to the side, I'm going to turn that into a simplified square root of 2 square roots of 2. So over here I have x plus 6. And over the other side, I'm going to write this as plus or minus 2 square roots of 2. All right, last step. Let's move the 6 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I get minus 6 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2. And all of that looks pretty ugly, but that's right. It's just a number. You put that into the equation, and you get actually two answers, negative 6 plus 2 square roots of 3 and negative 6 minus 2 square roots of 3. All right, you're going to practice the next couple of problems, and then we'll come back and look at the next type of problem. Okay, so the only additional thing that we're doing with this equation is that we have a quadratic equation that has a coefficient for x squared that's not 1. So we have this leading coefficient that's a 3, and we're going to get rid of that. So the goal is to always get rid of the leading coefficient if we can. So I'm going to draw a line under here because I'm going to divide, and I'm going to divide by 3, because if I divide 3 by 3, I get a leading coefficient of 1. So remember, the rule for solving equations is whatever I do to one side, I do to both sides. So I'm stopping and dividing all the way through by 3. So now I have x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. And now that's the exact same kind of problem we just did a few minutes ago. We're going to complete the square. So the only step we had to add to this was just to get rid of the leading coefficient, divide by that number. So again, I'm going to write b is equal to, and b is negative 2. And b over 2 is negative 1. And b over 2 squared is a positive 1. So what I need in this location right here is a positive 1, and I don't have one. So I need to move that 4 to the other side. So let's do that. Minus 4, minus 4. I get x squared minus 2x. There's a space now. And on this side, I have minus 4. And what am I going to fill in that space with? I'm going to fill in that space with b over 2 squared. So I'm going to add a 1 there. If I add a 1 there, I'm going to add a 1 there. Okay, almost done. Last step. Now that I have the perfect trinomial, I'm going to replace it with the perfect binomial. X. And what's b over 2? b over 2 is negative 1. And what do I get on the other side? Minus 4 plus 1 is minus 3. And last step. Let's go ahead and solve that thing. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. And here we have on this side x minus 1. And on this side, oops, we have the square root of negative 3. So let's get rid of that. Over here, square root of negative 3. Nice that you know complex numbers and imaginary numbers now, because you know I can break this up into the square root of 3 and the square root of negative 1. But the square root of negative 1 is I. And I'm going to write the I out front. So the square root of negative 3 is equal to I3, square roots of 3, equals x minus 1. And let's bring that minus 1 to the other side by adding 1 to both sides. Oops. And we can't ever forget that we have a plus or minus on this side, and we have a plus or minus on this side, right? So we have x is equal to a positive 1 plus or minus I square roots of 3. And you guys look like real mathematicians because you guys know imaginary numbers and you know how to solve square roots. Very nice. You're going to practice solving the next couple of equations. The next topic is we're using this to solve, completing the square to turn something into vertex form. So I'm going to make another video. It'll be another 5-minute video. If you don't understand anything, please be prepared to come in and ask questions on Thursday, because on Thursday I will put all of this back up there and allow you to ask questions and go through it. Okay, good luck, and I will see you Thursday.